Welcome back to Sleepy Hollow Uncovered. Tonight we are not on a path of investigation or analysis. We are not here to chase phantoms or solve mysteries. Instead, I invite you to join me for a different kind of journey. A journey into rest. Our story finds Ichabod Crane far from the boisterous party at the Van Tassel Manor, and long before his fateful ride. Imagine him now, a guest at the remote Van Ripper farm, the rest of the household deep in slumber. The great, timbered house is quiet, save for the sighing of the wind in the eaves and the slow, steady ticking of a grandfather clock in the hall. A fire in the hearth has burned down to glowing, orange embers, casting a soft, warm light on the room. The title is faded, but you can just make it out in the candlelight. The Hieroglyphics of Hieroglyphics, an ancient text, a key to the forgotten symbols of Egypt for a man of his disposition. This is irresistible. It is a book of secrets, a whisper from a world long dead. So he sits now, wrapped in a heavy quilt, the book resting on his lap, the candle beside him, his only companion. The world of Sleepy Hollow, with all its anxieties, rivalries, and fears, fades away, replaced by the silent, symbolic world of the ancients. I invite you now to join him. Find a comfortable position. Let your own world fade. Listen to the sound of my voice as the voice of Ichabod, reading softly in the deep quiet of the night. There is nothing to understand, nothing to analyze. Simply allow the words and the atmosphere to be a gentle guide, leading you away from your waking thoughts and into a peaceful, restorative sleep. The old house settled around him, groaning softly, as old houses do. Outside, the autumn wind combed through the skeletal branches of the trees, a lonely, soothing sound. But inside, there was only the deep, profound stillness of the hour before midnight. Ichabod adjusted the candle, its small golden flame dancing, casting long, wavering shadows across the room. He ran a finger over the dry, embossed leather of the book's cover. It felt like history itself. He opened it carefully, the spine cracking like a twig, and a faint, sweet smell of dust and time rose from its pages. His eyes, wide and accustomed to the dim light, scanned the introduction. The book, it claimed, was a translation of the work of Hieroglyphics, one of the last priests of the old Egyptian ways, who sought to preserve the meaning of the sacred symbols before they were lost to time. Ichabod's heart, prone to both fright and fascination, beat a little faster. This was knowledge of the deepest kind. He turned the first page, the paper rustling softly in the immense quiet of the farmhouse. He leaned closer to the candle, his breathing slow and steady, and began to read aloud, his voice barely more than a whisper, for his own contemplation. The Hieroglyphics of Hieroglyphics, Book the first, how they signify eternity. He paused, letting the word hang in the air. Eternity. Such a vast concept to be held in a single symbol. He read on, to signify eternity. They depict the sun and the moon, because they are eternal elements, and when they would represent eternity differently, they delineate a serpent with its tail concealed by the rest of its body. The name of this serpent in Egyptian is Urias, which in Greek signifies basilisk. Ichabod looked up from the page, his eyes drifting towards the dark window pane, where the reflection of the candle flame floated like a captured star. The sun and the moon. He thought of the brilliant harvest moon that now hung over the sleeping hollow, the same moon that had shone on these ancient Egyptians, and the serpent devouring its own tail, without beginning or end, a perfect circle of being. He felt a sense of calm, a feeling of connection to a timeline so immense it made his own small worries seem trivial. The steady rhythm of the house, the rise and fall of his own chest, it was all part of this unbroken circle. He turned the page, the sound a gentle whisper in the night. How they denote the universe. When they would denote the universe, they again delineate a serpent devouring its own tail. For the universe annually undergoes a change in the world, and is so to speak made young again. It indicates also the circuit of the stars, the same symbol, yet a different meaning. He imagined the great serpent of the cosmos, the Milky Way, a trail of glittering scales across the deep dark velvet of the night sky. He thought of the seasons turning in Sleepy Hollow, the green life of summer, now giving way to the brilliant death of autumn, which would in turn yield to the quiet sleep of winter, only to be reborn in the spring. All of it, a great slow cosmic turning, a universe, forever being made young again. His own body felt heavy, sinking into the warmth of the quilt, a tiny part of this immense turning world. His eyelids felt heavy too, but the allure of the book was strong. He drew the candle a little closer, its light a small defense against the overwhelming darkness. How they represent the soul. When they wish to symbolize the soul, they depict the hawk, because this bird for the most part drinks not water, but blood, by which the soul is sustained. Moreover, the hawk is a long-lived creature. A hawk, he pictured one soaring high above the valley, seeing all the farms and fields, the river and the road, with its keen, sharp eyes, a creature of the sky, unbound by the earth, and sustained by blood, by life itself. The soul as a predator, fierce and alive. He considered his own soul a timid thing, perhaps, not a hawk, but maybe a smaller bird. Yet it was there, a flickering warmth inside him, just like the candle flame, a life force, sustained by the steady, quiet work of his own heart, the beating of his heart, thump thump, a soft, slow drum in the silence. The ticking of the clock in the hall seemed to match the rhythm of his heart. Tick-tock, thump-thump. The house was breathing with him. The wind outside sighed again, a long, low exhalation. He felt himself exhaling with it. He read another entry, his voice growing softer, slower. How they signify silence to denote silence. They portray a man who is a hierophant, with the forefinger of his right hand placed upon his lips. Ichabod unconsciously touched his own lips. Silence. It was all around him. A deep, comfortable, weighted silence. The kind that allows you to hear the blood moving in your own ears. The kind that allows the mind to finally grow still. There were no demands in this silence. No expectations. No one to impress. No rival to outwit. There was only the quiet and the soft light and the ancient words, the Hierophant, guarding the great secret of silence. He felt himself drifting. The words on the page began to blur slightly at the edges. His thoughts were no longer sharp and clear, but soft and meandering, like smoke from the dying embers. He turned one last page, his movements slow, as if moving through water. How they denote fate. To denote fate, they depict a star, for the motion of the stars has a commanding influence over all things in the world. A star. He gazed again at his reflection in the dark glass, at the tiny captured star of his candle. He thought of his own fate, of his ambitions, of Katrina, of the life he hoped to build. Was it all written in the stars, as the ancients believed? Was his path already laid out across the heavens, a constellation of his own joys and sorrows? The thought was not frightening, it was releasing. To believe that a power so vast and beautiful held the threads of his small life gave him a sense of peace. There was nothing to strive for, nothing to fear, only a path to be walked, a destiny to be met. His head nodded forward. He caught himself, blinking slowly. The book felt impossibly heavy on his lap. The candle flame seemed to be shrinking, drawing into itself. The words had faded from his mind, replaced by the simple, powerful symbols: the moon, the serpent, the hawk, the star. Each one a key unlocking a door, not to ancient Egypt, but to the quiet chambers of his own mind. Chambers that were now dark, and still, and ready for rest. He did not need to read any more. He carefully closed the book, its cover sighing shut. He placed it on the small table beside him. He snuffed out the candle between his thumb and forefinger, plunging the room into a soft, deep darkness, lit only by the faint, pulsing glow of the embers in the hearth. The last of his waking thoughts was of the serpent, endlessly circling, forever returning to itself, a symbol of eternity, of the universe, and now of the deep dreamless and restorative sleep that was finally claiming him. And in the quiet farmhouse, surrounded by the sleeping hollow, Ichabod Crane drifted away. The farmhouse sank into the profoundest depths of night. In the hearth, the last ember pulsed with a soft, sleepy orange light, then finally surrendered to a gentle grey ash. The old clock in the hall, having faithfully marked the passage of the waking hours, seemed to slow its pace, its tick-tock a soft, muffled heartbeat in the sleeping body of the house. Moonlight, clear and silver, streamed through the window, painting a cool, silent square of light upon the floorboards, where just an hour before, a candle had burned. Ichabod Crane was adrift. He had passed through that initial, dreamless void, that quiet abyss of true rest. Now, his mind, untethered from the world of worries and arithmetic, began to weave. It was a dreamscape born, not of anxiety or ambition, but from the last impressions left upon his waking mind, the ancient symbols from the leather-bound book. His dream began, not with a sight, but with a feeling, a sensation of impossible lightness. He was weightless, rising. The heavy quilt, the creaking bed, the very pull of the earth fell away from him. He felt a phantom wind beneath phantom wings, and he knew, with the certainty that only dreams can provide, that he was the hawk he had read about. He was the soul. He banked on an invisible current of air, soaring high above a silent, sleeping landscape. It was Sleepy Hollow, but transformed into a place of perfect peace. The moonlight washed over the hills and forest, rendering them in shades of silver and soft charcoal. The Hudson River was a ribbon of polished steel. There were no shouting rivals, no coquettish glances, no fears of failure. There was only the effortless glide, the vast, silent panorama unfolding beneath him. He could see every field, every fence, every slumbering farmhouse, all of it quiet, all of it at peace. The fierce predatory nature of the hawk was gone. In its place was only the gift of its perspective, the serene omniscience of seeing the world whole and still. Down below, the winding road that led to the church bridge was just a pale thin thread. There was no menace in it. It was simply a part of the pattern, a line in a beautiful sleeping drawing. He drifted over it, feeling no fear, only a profound sense of calm detachment, as if viewing a life that belonged to someone else entirely. His dream gaze lifted from the earth, drawn upwards towards the canopy of the heavens. He remembered the symbol for the universe, the great serpent, as he soared higher, leaving the silvered landscape of Sleepy Hollow behind. The very stars themselves began to shift and move. They were no longer individual points of light, but flowing, glittering scales on the back of an immense, celestial creature. He was floating in the presence of the cosmic serpent, the Uraeus of eternity. It coiled through the endless, silent void, its body a river of nebulae and star clusters. Its movement was so slow, so grand, that a single undulation of its form would take 1,000 lifetimes to complete. He saw galaxies turn like great, silent wheels, and comets drift like luminous pollen. Here, in this absolute silence, was the true meaning of eternity. The universe, he saw, was not empty space dotted with objects. It was a single living, breathing entity, a serpent forever chasing its own tail, forever being made young again. His own small form, the hawk of his soul, was just a speck of dust floating in its presence. And yet, he felt no fear. There was no malice in this immense being. There was only a sublime, unending, and peaceful existence. The anxieties of his mortal life, of securing a good meal, of winning a lady's favor, of outwitting a rival, seemed so impossibly distant, so laughably small, as to have never existed at all. From the text, another symbol bloomed in his dreaming mind. The symbol for knowledge, not the rote learning of books and sums, but a deeper knowing. The book had said it was signified by an eye, and a scepter painted, and in the heart of the star serpent's coils, he saw it, a vast single eye, calm and all-seeing, opened slowly. It was not an eye that judged or threatened, but one that simply knew, and from it emanated a soft, golden light, a light that felt like understanding. The light touched him, and he understood the hawk. He understood the serpent. He understood the silent moon and the life-giving sun. He understood the turning of the seasons upon the earth below, and the slow celestial dance above. It was knowledge not as a collection of facts, but as a feeling of belonging to the great, interconnected whole. He was a part of the pattern, a single feather on the hawk's wing, a single scale on the serpent's back. His dream began to shift again, the cosmic vision slowly dissolving. He was no longer a hawk, but himself. Yet he was not in the farmhouse bed. He was standing in a vast, quiet library. The shelves were impossibly tall, stretching up into a soft, inconclusive darkness. Every book was bound in simple dark leather, with no titles. He knew instinctively that this was the library of lives, the archive of souls. He felt a presence beside him, and turned. It was the Hierophant, the figure of silence, a tall, calm figure, whose face was gentle and serene. With the forefinger of his right hand placed upon his lips, he did not speak, but he looked at Ichabod, and then gestured towards a single, open volume on a reading stand. Ichabod approached. The page was filled not with words, but with a single moving image, like a basin of perfectly still water reflecting a scene. He saw himself, a young boy, learning his letters. He saw himself as a young man, full of ambition and insecurity. He saw his journey to Sleepy Hollow. He saw his hopes, his petty jealousies, his moments of small kindness, his overwhelming fear of ghosts and goblins. He was seeing the hieroglyph of his own life. The Hierophant placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. There was no judgment in the touch, only a silent, compassionate understanding. The message was clear. This too is a sacred text. This too is a part of the great story. The image in the book began to soften and blur. The towering shelves of the library dissolved back into the soft darkness of the cosmic void. The quiet presence of the Hierophant faded, leaving behind only the deep, resonant feeling of silence. Ichabod was floating again, a single point of consciousness in a vast, warm and peaceful darkness. He was not the hawk, not the dreamer, not the scholar. He was simply resting, held safely in the great silent turning of the universe, a universe that would in time be made young again. His breathing was deep and even, a tide pulling in and out from the shores of a dreamless sleep. For a time that cannot be measured, there was nothing. No hawk, no serpent, no library. There were no thoughts, no images, no memories of a life filled with small anxieties. There was only the deep, restorative, dark. It was the quiet, cellular work of a body at peace, the silent mending of a mind untroubled by dreams or waking cares. It was the stillness of the seed deep in the winter earth, the stillness of the water in the deepest part of the well, a state of pure being, without past or future. But even the longest night must yield. The change came not as a sound, but as a subtle shift in the quality of the darkness. The profound inky black of the deep night began to soften at its edges, thinning to a charcoal grey. The brilliant silver coin of the moon had spent its light and sunk below the western hills. Now, in the east, the first faint grey promise of dawn was breathing against the horizon. This subtle shift in the world outside sent a gentle ripple into the quiet pool of Ichabod's sleep. It was the first stirring of consciousness, a slow, gentle surfacing from the deep. He was not yet awake, but he was returning. The abstract sense of peace from his dream began to coalesce with the first sensations of his physical body. He felt the weight of the heavy quilt upon him, a comforting, grounding pressure. He felt the cool, crisp air of the pre-dawn room on his face. His first conscious breath was a long, slow inhalation, filling his lungs completely. He exhaled with a soft sigh. His eyelids fluttered. Then he was in the chair, in the dim grey light of the farmhouse parlour. The fire was long dead, a mound of soft ash in the hearth. The shadows in the room were no longer the deep, wavering phantoms of the candlelight, but were soft, diffuse, and retreating. He felt a slight stiffness in his neck from sleeping at an awkward angle, but it was a simple, physical fact, not a discomfort. There was no grogginess, no jarring return to the world. He felt the visions of the night were no longer vivid, but their echo, their feeling, remained. It was a profound sense of calm, a quiet clarity he had never before experienced. The frantic, skittish energy that so often propelled him seemed to have been washed clean. He rose slowly from the chair, the quilt falling from his shoulders, and walked to the window. The world outside was hushed and waiting. A delicate layer of frost had silvered every blade of grass and traced the intricate patterns of the bare tree branches. The air was perfectly still. In the east, the grey sky was now blushing with the softest hints of lavender and rose. He looked upon this familiar scene, but saw it with new eyes, the eyes of his dream. He saw the great silent turning of the universe in the coming sunrise. He saw the resilience of the soul in the frosted, sleeping trees that would in time bud again. He saw the gift of silence in the perfect stillness of the morning air. His mind went to the day ahead. There would be lessons to teach, a journey back to his quarters, a world of social navigation to contend with, but the thought brought no anxiety. The frantic striving within him had been replaced by a sense of acceptance. He remembered the final hieroglyph he had read. Fate, represented by a star. His life would be what it would be. There was a strange and wonderful freedom in that thought. He did not need to be the hawk, soaring above all others. He only needed to be himself, a single part of the great, unfolding pattern. A lone bird, somewhere in the waking woods, let out its first clear, sleepy chirp. The sound was not startling. It was a perfect note in the quiet symphony of the dawn. Ichabod took one more deep breath of the cool morning air, his mind clear, his heart quiet. His long night's journey was complete. He had travelled to the edge of eternity, and returned, not with the secret of everlasting life, but with a far rarer treasure, a moment of perfect peace. And so we leave him there, a solitary figure standing in the soft light of a new day, the haunted, fearful schoolmaster of legend, for a moment forgotten, replaced by a man simply watching the sun rise.